Welcome back to the very first episode of Mac Stories Unwind for 2024. This episode is brought to you by Collide. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Happy New Year, Federico.
Happy New Year to you as well, John. How are you?
I'm doing really well. We had a little time off. It was kind of nice. Got a little rest, just taking it easy with the family, doing holiday stuff, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, did you eat enough food?
Oh, I ate way too much food, Federico. So much food, in fact, that I haven't weighed myself in quite a while, and I'm a little scared too. I thought, what I decided to do? I thought I would do a little exercise and live a little healthier life for a week or two before I jump back on the scale and see how much damage I've done. I figured that'll give me a little bit of a head start to getting back on track.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, it's been a fun holiday break over here as well. Of course, tons of food, tons of wine, which is always nice. Getting together with friends and family, but it was also a special holiday break for me, John, because I have been busy, and I've been keeping not just this show is famous for every once in a while we try to surprise each other.
Yes.
And I've started teasing weeks ago to you that I've been working on my biggest surprise to date for this show.
I think it was like the week of Christmas or something. You started telling me about this, and on and off throughout the holidays, you mentioned to me that you're working on it.
And the week of Christmas, that was already ongoing for about 10 days or so. So really, I've been working on this for about a month at this point, and I was saving this for the debut episode of Unwind in 2024. And see, the thing is, this is not a surprise, John. There's an idea that has spawned multiple surprises. In fact,
interesting.
At the very least, for the next 2, 3, maybe more like 3 episodes of Unwind, I'm going to be talking about this topic and all the ramifications involved. And I'm sure you will have questions after you understand what I've been working on. And we can save those questions for future episodes. And of course, there's an aspect of this project that I'm going to talk about today, and I'm sure you will also have questions today. So you have no idea what I've been working on. You have no idea. You tried to guess on iMessage as we were talking privately. You tried to guess something about music.
Yeah, I thought maybe you did something crazy like bought like a big media center and got like some, like some fancy speakers or something like that.
No. You're very off base. So let me contextualize. I'll tell you up front, this is about video games.
Okay, good. That's one of my favorite topics.
Yeah. And I know that going into this, you're going to lose your mind. And I think, I'm pretty confident that you're going to love this. So it's about the Nintendo Switch.
Okay.
So I started getting this feeling a few months ago, sort of this dichotomy inside of me, where the best games, my favorite games of 2023 were all Nintendo Switch games. I love Nintendo. Obviously, like it's been my love growing up and to this day. And my favorite games of the year, really, they're all Nintendo Switch games. Zelda, Mario.
Yeah, we played a lot of Switch games in 2023.
Yeah, Zelda, Mario, Metroid. There's a huge backlog that I need to get through. Fire Emblem, I still want to play. Like I love Nintendo games. Pokemon, obviously, I've been working my way through the DLC. But I started getting this feeling inside of me a few months ago that I was getting kind of tired of the Nintendo Switch hardware. And I mean, it's been 7 years, right? The Nintendo Switch will turn 7 in March. It came out in 2017.
And it was released with a chipset that was probably about 5 years old.
The Tegra X1 system on a chip was already an old chip at the time.
Right.
And so I started thinking about this, really it was around Thanksgiving, I think. This feeling of like, I love Switch games so much. But I feel like I've reached a point now where I have my gaming PC, I have my PS5. There's just this chasm between
there absolutely
graphical, and it's not just about graphical fidelity, but just sheer performance, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like, especially with Tears of the Kingdom, I was getting to that point. Like I really started feeling this problem with Tears of the Kingdom, where like this incredible game with such a beautiful artistic direction that is getting, sort of limited, way too limited by the hardware, especially
Uh-huh.
when you play in handheld mode. And so I let this feeling inside of me, and I thought about it, and then something went off in my brain, and I realized it's been 7 years since the Nintendo Switch hardware. It is time for me to try and get into Nintendo Switch emulation.
I had a feeling that's where you're going because I think I remember when I talked about the Odin 2 telling you about how you can emulate Switch games on it.
And I was actually already doing that at the time, and I didn't say
Interesting.
anything. I was like, oh yeah, really interesting.
Ah,
Yeah, this has been in the works for quite some time, John. So before I get into the details of how I did this, because it's a whole story that I think you're gonna love, I need to say also that in thinking about this and coming to the realization of like, I want to try Nintendo Switch emulation, I realized that I've always been this person. And what I mean by this is, I've always been the guy who loves Nintendo games and plays a lot of Nintendo games on non Nintendo hardware.
mm-hmm.
I have a deep and long history that goes back to when I was 13 and I finished Super Metroid on a PSP.
I remember that. Yeah, you were cracking the PSPs
I
and
was
putting.
cracking the PSP back in my high school days to play Super Nintendo games and Game Boy games. I was
Uh-huh.
already doing all of that at the time. I used to, I played for a very long time GameCube games on PC and compatible handhelds. I played GameCube games on my Mac using the Dolphin emulator.
Mm-hmm.
I have always been. I finished a Chrono Trigger also on a PSP. I have always been the kind of person who absolutely loves Nintendo games, and by this I'm not trying to say that I don't love Nintendo hardware, but I think I love Nintendo hardware up until a certain point
Mm-hmm.
when either it becomes a problem of performance or it becomes a problem of access. Like when I wanted to play Super Metroid as a kid, it was impossible for me to get Super Metroid.
Right,
Now,
right.
access is no longer a problem these days, thanks to Nintendo Switch Online and other services, but performance continues to be that kind of problem. And plus, it was just, I figured, a project that could be interesting, just a fun holiday project.
Well, I know exactly where you're coming from, Federico. Just to interrupt for a second, because one of the
Yeah.
things I did over the holidays was I moved my 3DS library, the digital games that I have on the
Yeah.
3DS, over to the Odin. And that was a lot of work because it's not
Mm-hmm.
super easy with the digital store because the metadata doesn't come over and it's just
Yeah.
it was a lot of manual labor, but I got it all moved over and I've got all those games there. And it was more because of I didn't want to have them locked into an old 3DS where, it'd be one thing if I could take all of my old hardware. I have more than one 3DS in the house and copy all those games onto all those systems. But Nintendo doesn't even let you do that. It's just
Mm-hmm.
really hard to move those games around from one piece of Nintendo hardware to another. And by moving it all over to the Odin, I have everything in one place now and it's all neatly organized.
Yeah. So I started looking at Nintendo Switch emulation about a month ago, and I
Mm-hmm.
did some research, and I knew that I wanted to try the Yuzu emulator. That's Yuzu.
Are
Yuzu.
there any others other than that one? That's the only
There's
one that I'm
a
familiar with.
Ryujinx, I think it's called, and there used to be
Okay.
another one called Skyline that, however, got shut down, and parts of the technology are now part of Yuzu, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, it's basically either Ryu or Yuzu. And I wanted to go with Yuzu because it felt like it's the most popular one that is also cross-platform now.
This episode of Mac Stories Unwind is brought to you by Collide. If you work in security or IT and your company has Okta, this message is for you. Have you ever noticed that in the past few years, the majority of data breaches and hacks you read about have one thing in common? It's employees. Hackers absolutely love to exploit vulnerable employee devices and credentials. But it doesn't have to be that way. Imagine a world where only secure devices can access your cloud apps. In that world, phished credentials are useless to hackers, and you can manage every OS, even Linux, from a single dashboard. Best of all, you can get employees to fix their own device security issues without creating more work for IT. The good news is you don't have to imagine that world. You can just start living it with Collide. Collide is the device trust solution for companies that use Okta, and it ensures that if a device isn't trusted and secure, it can't log into your cloud apps. Visit collide.com/MacStoriesUnwind to watch a demo and see how it works. That's KOLIDE.com/MacStoriesUnwind. Our thanks to Collide for their support of the show.
So I started looking at Nintendo Switch emulation, but there was one key idea behind it for me, which really was what complicated the project and what took me a bit of time to figure out, which is one of my priorities was, if I am going to get into all of this, I need to rip my own games. I am making a point out of never, ever downloading a pirated game from any website. I need to be able to rip manually, one by one, my physical games and my digital games, and I need to do it myself. Get my own files, transform those games into compatible file formats for the Yuzu emulator, either XCI for physical games or NSP for digital games. These are the file types that the Nintendo Switch uses. And yeah, my point was I need to be able to rip my own games. I don't want to ever download them from a website. And similarly, I want to be able to transfer my save data from my Nintendo Switch to the PC. I need to be able to basically replicate my Nintendo Switch library and my Nintendo Switch history and save data onto the emulator on PC. And that was tricky. So
I bet it was. It was tricky enough when I tried to do it with the 3DS.
Brief history of Nintendo Switch hacking. The Nintendo Switch was hacked about a year after its existence. In 2018, the first exploit of the NVIDIA Tegra X1 chip. Pardon my accent, I guess. It's a French word. The name of the exploit is Fusée Gelée. I believe it stands for frozen rocket. I don't know why. But the Fusée Gelée exploit uses a critical vulnerability in the original Nintendo Switch hardware. So the first generation Nintendo Switch, the non-OLED, the LCD model, in the boot ROM of the Tegra system on chip. And the boot ROM is a critical component. It's a tiny bit of memory that is stored inside the chip and that tells the chip what to do when it gets power, when it turns on.
Right.
And specifically, it allows for arbitrary code execution at boot. So this exploit allows an old, unpatched Nintendo Switch to run any code you want. And after the Fusée Gelée exploit, other exploits came onto the scene. More specifically, in modern history, a physical mod appeared. So you can. I learned. I had no idea about any of this until a month ago.
Yeah.
You can get even a Nintendo Switch OLED modded with the physical mod chip. So it's like you're literally soldering stuff.
Onto the board. You're actually soldering a new chip onto the board. Yeah.
And I didn't. So obviously, to long story short, I didn't want to do any of this.
He just ended up destroying your Switch or something.
I didn't want to destroy my Nintendo Switch. And also, another important factor to consider, which we're going to talk about for the next few episodes, I didn't want my Nintendo account to get banned because Nintendo, if they find out that you're accessing Nintendo services from a hacked Nintendo Switch, from a modded console, they're going to ban your account. And I didn't want to get my account banned, obviously. So I did some research, and boy, I gotta tell you, I hadn't modded a console in 15 years. Maybe
Right.
the last console I actually ran homebrew code on was my Nintendo Wii. I never did it with the DS. I never did it with the 3DS. So my homebrew experience stopped with the Nintendo Wii. So eventually, I decided to go with purchasing an original Nintendo Switch already hacked on eBay from an Italian guy on eBay.
Oh, interesting.
I don't have the original Nintendo Switch anymore.
I
I
thought you
sold it.
didn't. I thought you didn't. I still have mine. I mean, this is one of the reasons. This is my excuse for keeping old hardware around, Federico, is that I can deal with things like these exploits.
Yeah. In hindsight, I should have done the same. So I found a seller on eBay before Christmas. I bought a pre-modded, I guess, original Nintendo Switch modded with the software exploit, so the Fusage
Okay.
exploit, and even better, a Nintendo Switch that was running the latest firmware. So Nintendo Switch firmware version 17, that's the latest one,
Mhm.
and a relatively up-to-date version of Atmosphere. Atmosphere being the name of the custom firmware, so the custom operating system
Mhm.
that you can run on a Nintendo Switch. Now, once again, I need to highlight here, I am not doing this to install pirated games. In fact, at Christmas, I bought a bunch of Nintendo Switch games that were missing from my physical collection because I
Yeah.
wanted to rip them all over the holidays.
Yeah.
Which I did, but we'll get to this later. So I got my custom Nintendo Switch from eBay. Very, very kind and gracious person I found. This guy has been teaching me a bunch of things. We exchanged phone numbers, and he taught me a lot of things over WhatsApp. Even
Oh,
over
nice.
Christmas, it was very kind. So I got my Nintendo Switch, and that's when it all actually started. So we're gonna get into more aspects of this into the next over the next few episodes. But to give you a brief summary, I now have this Nintendo Switch that
Right.
lets me run 3 separate OSs. There's the untouched, unmodified Nintendo Switch firmware. There's Atmosphere, which is custom firmware, and there's the hybrid. It's called SysNAND. It's basically an original firmware with access to custom apps.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so with this Nintendo Switch, the mod works by using a so-called RCM jig. So
Okay.
RCM stands for recovery mode. That's RCM, recovery mode.
Mm-hmm.
You enter recovery mode on a Nintendo Switch by unplugging the right Joy-Con and inserting this little plastic jig. It's basically like a plastic clip.
Okay.
You can actually, I bought one from Amazon. They are sold pre-made for like $5.
Uh-huh.
You can make one your own using a paper clip.
Oh.
You just need to touch 2 little contacts
Uh-huh.
on the right side of the Joy-Con rail. So you pull down this little plastic thing, you press and hold the power button and the volume plus button
Right.
while your Nintendo Switch is plugged over USB to a computer
Okay.
running a piece of software called Tegra RCM UI. And
Oh.
yep.
This
And
gives you access to the file system.
doing that
Oh.
when the Nintendo Switch powers on,
Yeah.
enters recovery mode.
Right.
The program on your PC intercepts that recovery mode,
Yeah.
stops it, and injects a payload.
Oh,
Basically,
interesting.
Injecting custom code that says, no, stop the recovery mode there, and now
Yeah.
boot with this other boot method. That is
Huh.
called a bootloader. And I
Got
am using a bootloader called Hecate. That's Hekate. Hecate. And Hecate is a custom UI. It's a menu that lets me choose the different operating systems that I
Right.
want to run, and lets me connect my Nintendo Switch over USB to a computer to browse its file system.
Right.
Let
That's
me
kind
do
of
a
what I
bunch of
meant.
things. And so that's what I've been doing as preparation.
Do you have to use the bootloader every time you want to do this?
Every time you turn off, you actually power off your
Mm-hmm.
Nintendo Switch.
Yeah.
Once you power it on again, by default, it will go to the non-hacked mode.
Right.
So every time you want to do the custom bootloader, you need to
Mm-hmm.
use this method. But when you restart, so when you soft restart your Nintendo Switch, it'll stay with the custom
Sure.
bootloader.
Right.
Just
Until you
when you
actually,
actually power it off, that's when you got to do it again.
yeah, you're cycling the whole,
You are cycling. Yes.
right. And you're doing this from a Windows PC, I assume, too,
I'm
right?
doing this from a Windows PC. And so that's what really took up the majority of the time over the holidays.
I bet. I bet.
I have been using a software on the Nintendo Switch itself to rip my own cartridges, as well as convert digital downloads, DLCs, and updates into compatible file formats that I later transferred to my PC. I have also been using this piece of software, John, you may be familiar with, given
Yeah.
your 3DS experience. I have been using a program called the JKSV to
Mm-hmm.
transfer my save data. The same guy who made JKSV for the 3DS made JKSV for Nintendo Switch. And this allows you to take all of your save data into and export your saves and continue playing a game as you were playing it on an actual Nintendo Switch
Uh-huh.
onto an emulator. You just take your save
Nice.
and you continue playing your game on another console, on another emulator.
How fast is the ripping process?
Oh,
Because I
it's not
know with,
fast. It's
okay,
not
because
fast. It takes about 15 minutes.
yeah, because those are big games and the hardware is not super fast, I would assume. At
Hardware
least
is not fast. Yeah.
yeah, I mean the 3DS, it was just like glacial pace because that hardware is not super fast and the games are smaller, but some of the Pokemon games and stuff reach into the gigabytes and took quite a while. I'll tell you
Yep.
one thing that's kind of interesting about the digital store on the 3DS, which is a little frustrating, is that they're all, even the games that were from the virtual console on the 3DS, you know, the Game Boy games, the Game Boy Advance games, that sort of thing, those are recognized as 3DS games by emulators because of the file format that's coming off of
Hmm.
the 3DS. And
Yeah.
as a result, I have a bunch of Game Boy games in my 3DS library, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
not a huge it's not
Makes
a huge
sense.
deal, but it does make finding like where is that one? I mean, is it in with my Game Boy cartridges that I ripped, or is it in with the 3DS things that came off the digital library? But yeah, it was a slow but
Yep.
satisfying process
Yep.
because once I got all the metadata transferred over and updated, everything's very easy to use now.
Yep. And the best part is because you can now with a hacked Nintendo Switch, you can choose the different operating systems versions. So I
Right.
was able to download my saves by using online services and downloading my save data from the Nintendo Switch cloud, and then booting into the modded software. That's when I use airplane mode. And I have a bunch of services installed that block Nintendo DNS and other services so that they don't see my account when I'm using the custom firmware.
Hmm.
But at that point, I already have my save data locally. So that's how I was able to transfer, say, my Tears of the Kingdom save from the Nintendo Switch OLED onto the hacked Nintendo Switch and eventually over to my PC, where I have been continuing my playthrough of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom just where I left it off. But now you may wonder, John, where have you been playing these games?
Oh yeah, no,
Actually,
I have some ideas, but you tell me.
but that's for next week's episode.
Oh, you're gonna leave me hanging. You're gonna leave me
Yep.
hanging. Wow. Well, Federico, this is quite a good surprise. I mean, I know just from some of the stuff that I've done how much work this is, and I'm super intrigued and interested in doing something like this myself at some point, but no time soon because I know how much time you probably put into this over the holidays.
Yeah, and don't worry, I'll start teasing you with screenshots of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom in 4K.
Oh,
Those are
yeah.
coming.
I figured that that's where we were headed with this, too. I mean, it's not enough that you get the games off. You got to make them look nice and pretty, too.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks for that New Year's surprise, Federico. I appreciate it. I want to thank our sponsor for this episode, too. That's Collide. You can find the two of us over at macstories.net. Federico and I are on Mastodon. Just go to vitici.macstories.net or johnvorhees.macstories.net to follow us there. And you can find us on Threads and Instagram, where Federico is at Vitici. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHEES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.